Welcome to this video, which is titled Salvation Through Eternal Suffering. The more I read on mythology, the more I find a relation between mythology and sacred text. Here I would like to take up the subject of salvation, a salvation which is linked to eternal suffering. We need a deeper definition to understand this title. And very apt for this particular type of exercise is a Greek myth. The myth of Prometheus, which was written around 8th century BC by Hesiod in a Theogony poem, talks about the gods of the Olympians and the Titans. Prometheus is a Titan, that is a god of the lower realm, and his name means forethinker or forward thinker. In common belief, he developed into a master craftsman, which is equivalent to the Vedic Vishwakarma, and in this connection he was associated with fire and creation of mortals. Because this was the express desire of Zeus of people being needed for worship. But having created the human beings, Prometheus wanted to give them the fire of the Olympians, because that is the true nature, because the breath of God was breathed into them. He stole the fire of Olympians and gave it to the humans in spite of the strict directive from Zeus, the supreme god. Zeus was not very happy, and he meted out a punishment that Prometheus should be nailed to a rock and go through eternal suffering, as a bird of prey would descend every day from the sun to eat his liver. Prometheus being immortal, his liver regenerates overnight for him to go through another day of suffering. This is the eternal suffering. But the conclusion of the story is more in the dream of the wife of Zeus. Zeus' wife Hera dreams that a mortal man conquers the Olympians and liberates Prometheus. Now, this particular story has a detailed mapping of how ultimately the humans become part of the divine consciousness. That is, the meaning behind this narrative is that ultimately man attains the status of the gods. The Christian concept of Christ suffering on the cross for salvation of humanity could be mapped to this Greek myth. And no other than St.Paul, the wisest of the disciples of Christ, drew on the Greek version of Psalm 8, verse 4 to 6, to highlight Jesus' human nature and his suffering on our behalf. Unless this relation is established, we find that it will be very hard to know how a person who suffers 2000 years back and dies on the cross could be an everlasting and eternal agent of salvation. And I will quote this particular part of the psalm. St. Paul says, quote, Jesus was made a little lower than the angels in the human nature, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. That last few words is very important, because taste death for everyone. So it is not a physical death. It is a spiritual death which is overcome and made everlasting. Continuing the quote, for it was fitting that the Father, for whom and by whom all things exist, in bringing many sons to glory, should make the pioneer, Christ, of their salvation perfect through suffering. So it is not just Jesus alone who is brought to glory on the cross. Many sons to glory And Jesus is the model, the role model, the pioneer of their salvation through suffering. This suffering is nothing but a continuous struggle to release ourselves from the temporal nature of inferior consciousness to the higher level of superior and divine consciousness. Continuing the quote, for because he himself has suffered and been tempted, he is able to help those who are tempted to reach this final state. Hebrew, second letter, verse 9 and 10 and 18. Prometheus is the spiritual archetype which revealed through Christ in the transcendent revelation of historical Jesus into Christ the consciousness which is everlasting. The eternally suffering Christ opens the path for mortal man to ascend to the level of the divine consciousness. Until that day, Christ is continuously nailed to the cross as Prometheus was nailed to the rock. I hope I have provided the key to open the door to inner meaning of eternal suffering as a process of salvation. Thank you for watching and listening, and have a great life.